Good morning.
Morning, Jane.
Every time I speak to you, it just seems to get worse, doesn't it? What do you think the impact of this is going to be? I mean, it pushes us further into junk territory, doesn't it?
Yeah, so on the one hand, I think it doesn't, I guess, exacerbate the impact currently in terms of, I think a lot of it has already been priced into the market, and so everyone's looking at Moody's mostly in terms of to see whether or not South Africa can remain on that global bond index. That's where really the kind of more the large-scale impact will come through. But I think what it really does tell us, and that is that Moody's has certainly been kind to South Africa.
They certainly have.
And if you look at what they're talking, what S&P came out and talking about is Eskom, is that they don't have faith that Eskom will turn around quickly. They spoke about reforms and they spoke about economic growth. And when we look at issues of fiscal deficit, it really talks about the country's ability to collect revenue and then how in essence it spends it. And so, for example, corporate income tax collection in South Africa is about 18% of what we collect. And so if the economy is continuing to be revised downwards from a growth point of view, it means you're going to collect a lower portion of your tax from income tax because companies are not growing, and so many of those companies will have an assessed tax loss. And therefore, this 50 billion that we saw, which is an under collection in tax revenue, is probably going to get wider. And so over and above Eskom, I think the growth story in South Africa, I think, is probably more concerning around what we expect in terms of the fiscal deficit.
All right, Moody's has given us 3 months. What can we do in that time? And is Cyril Ramaphosa the man who's going to be able to do that? I mean, he was just talking about the disunity within the party, but it's also those factional issues which he hasn't been able to stamp out.
Yeah. No, we've certainly spoken about how, they've tended to be an overemphasis on monetary policy, this whole conversation around price stability. But the problem is that what prices are you stabilizing when households don't have any disposable income to spend? And so we certainly need to take a view on how do we propel the economy from a microeconomy point of view. And that means, for example, taking a sector view and saying, how do we energize a particular sector? How do we attract investment in a particular sector? I'll make an example. Ghana, in the oceans economy, 2009 said we're going to zero rate tax in our fisheries, and over a 5-year period they were able to increase output of that sector 6 times. And so it's that kind of a sector approach, saying that which sector can absorb the highest amount of labor as well as generate sufficient contribution to GDP that can start improving the numbers that we're seeing now, that also will improve, I think, how we view the growth outlook of the economy. And I think that's certainly what we need to see coming out of National Treasury, Ministry of Finance and the Presidency, to see how do we take a microeconomy view in propelling the country back into growth.
And stamp out this expenditure that we're seeing, the gross government expenditure unaccounted for, which prevents any progress from happening anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, so if you remember at his State of the Nation address earlier on in the year, he spoke about a decentralization of the local government function, and in essence, which was supposed to improve service delivery, improve expenditure on budgets, etc. And I think that is probably a lot more of the reform that we need to see in context of those budgets or those expenditure numbers, irregular expenditure numbers. Is that how do you ensure that now local government is capacitated sufficiently to be able to carry out its mandate? And, we've heard from Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, for example, that there's a lot of undercapacitation also happening at local government level, which also makes the issue just as bad. So we certainly hope that they can nip that in the bud. But it was positive when we saw, of course, around the freezing of salaries and also just how many government employees were earning over R1 million, which was absolutely astounding.
So it's going to be a tough 3 months, rather stressful. Sifiso, thank you very much for talking to us.